Are your headphones noise canceling? Because I think,
They are. Is it going through the correct audio?
yeah, if the vacuum is still going, I can't hear it at all.
Oh, no, it's paused at this moment,
Is my point. Oh, okay,
but
okay,
it was going for most of the past 2 minutes.
okay. Then
Okay. Have you already had a chance to look through the document I sent over, the Google Doc?
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I looked through it.
cool. So I'm going to kind of start at the top. I know we already addressed some of these things. I also know you're familiar with some of these things, but I'm going to go down a rabbit hole on them for the purpose of the
That's
video and
okay.
audio. Cool. Still ask questions, and I will also stop every now and then and uh, ask you if you have it.
Okay. Info dump away.
Exactly. Fantastic. Okay. So, pipeline to activism. The reason we're talking about this is because neurodivergence in activism just makes sense. It's actually extremely common already, whether or not people have realized it. I think the reason for that is we've had to learn to advocate for ourselves. We already bring a lot of the organizational, like the spreadsheet, the record keeping things, skill sets to the table, and we have a strong passion for justice as autism and ADHD seems to bring out in people. So this is, a question that more and more people are realizing. They're effectively you as someone who is prominent in your community that happens to be respected, trusted, and in a position to start doing things, has found people coming to them saying, "What do I do?" And now you are saying, "I just started doing this a few years ago, but here's what I know." And there's a lot of people in your
Mm-hmm.
position. And the solution to this is all of us sharing all of our skill sets, ideas, information, and figuring out how to work together, which sounds like it should be easy because it's obviously in everyone's best interest. Can you hear the
Mm-hmm.
vacuum in the background? Fantastic. Jobber headphones. Wonderful. Um, okay. So uh, this isn't for you. This is more of a general thing, but I shouldn't be your only resource. And I'm saying that as a white man. Like, I found that a lot of people are, they come to me for advice because they see the work I'm doing. But what it really comes down to is what they need to start doing is listening to impacted communities. And the fact that they're going to listen to me about what's going on means usually the fact that they're coming to me rather than someone who has been impacted more so by all the things we're actually discussing usually means that they're not currently a safe person to have those conversations with and have not surrounded themselves with people who are anyways, usually means they need to do some level of self-work on their own to be a non-harmful part of these things. So
Mm-hmm.
starting for everyone with acknowledging and deconstructing their own privilege. Um, and one of the things I want to acknowledge at the very beginning of this is that a lot of these things are a practice. And what I mean by that is that they're saying in the same way it's yoga is a practice, you're no matter how well you know a move, you've never mastered it. You're always
Mm-hmm.
practicing it. You're always doing it as well as you can under the conditions you can as you can. And the moment you stop practicing it, you're no longer doing it. Being a good person is a practice. It's a lot of these things are, everyone thinks it's just you are there are or you aren't. No, you have to make a concerted effort to continue. And when it comes to privilege and the act of acknowledging your own and then deconstructing it and how that impacts all your biases, that is an ongoing process that seems to never end. And maybe someday I will not have to check myself, but everyone working on this has to take a massive step back and kind of question why they're doing this and how they should be doing it in a more supportive way to actually accomplish the goals they want to accomplish. Any questions on that part?
No, yeah, very clear.
Cool. On the same thing, this all needs to be rooted in liberation, anti-racism, and anti-colonization. The end result kind of needs to be not just solving one or two problems, but creating a world that doesn't marginalize or exploit its people. And that's a kind of a tag along of the first part.
Mm-hmm.
So this brings me to kind of a few of the next parts, which is the concept of a spiral staircase of learning, which is, it's not, there's no escalators, there's definitely no elevators. If you want, but when you're talking about things that require comfort to be able to process, like deconstructing privilege, like things that, you're when you're fighting cognitive dissonance, you kind of need to take it a little bit at a time, even if you're good at learning. And the concept of the
Mm-hmm.
spiral staircase is effectively you gain a little bit along the way. And for what it's worth, my favorite kind of visual metaphor of this is the Boston Aquarium, because it's not a staircase, but it's a ramp that goes around one big aquarium in the middle. And you get to different levels and see different parts of the reef, and then at the top you're able to actually look down and see, down to the bottom and see all the fish you just walked up around looking at. And it's
Yeah.
but the importance of this is knowing that there's definitely no ladders here, there's no escalators or elevators, and you have to kind of develop a framework for some of the things that need to be learned along the way. And frankly, most marginalized communities seem to already have a bit of a framework, because that framework is all about understanding how oppression impacts people, and
Mhm.
they have experienced it. Whereas, have a background, I have a familiarity with the concept of oppression from my Jewish
Mhm.
heritage, but I've not really experienced oppression in the same way as most of the people I'm trying to actually support. And that's something that many people coming into this discussion need to start with. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That brings me into something else I learned from a racial equity class about window of tolerance. I talked about comfort zones. The window of tolerance is effectively slightly outside of your comfort zone. The window of tolerance is your learning zone. It is discovering new information that you didn't already have, learning new concepts, expanding your frameworks and identity. Um, and it's right on the outside of your comfort zone, because like your comfort zone is here, and then everything you already know is within your comfort zone. In fact, probably a little more. And then so
Mhm.
there's a window of tolerance outside of your comfort zone that can be stretched to expand your comfort zone. And on the outside of that is the danger zone. And this is relevant for both radicalizing people and teaching or training them. And the reason I say that is because if you get someone who's really good at two or three things, and then you start handing them a fourth or fifth thing, you might overwhelm them. And you are so like when I was running my business, I realized I was training people too quickly and giving them too much responsibility and systematically
Mhm.
pushing them into the danger zone based on how quickly I thought they could handle being in where they were. And I didn't know this until I
Okay.
learned about the concept of a comfort zone and all that. So it kind of it ends up being applicable at a lot of different stages of learning, which is why I'm saying it in the beginning.
Mhm.
Often it comes down to, if you're running into an issue with something, you're, pushing someone out of their comfort zone. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's like your responsibility to fix, but, we talked about someone taking control of the conversation or trying to make it about their thing. That's kind of what it comes down to, is they're trying to keep it within their comfort zone, their special interest, or, yeah. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's most of it on the learning side. I'm going to go into kind of networking and then, okay, so I'm gonna stop. Yeah, I'm gonna jump into networking and then and growing, and then I'm gonna go back and forth a bit, but it all does tie
Okay.
together. So you should. This comes down to, like I said, creating a world that doesn't marginalize or exploit its people. That comes down to knowing the other players and supporting them. And so part of that is knowing your local politicians, knowing who's on what boards, who committees, who makes what decision, but also the directors of the local organizations, the administrators of the local organizations, the people who make things happen and make all these things work. And you don't have to like all these people. You certainly don't have to work with all these people, but you should know who they are, because at the end of the day, they're kind of the cogs in the systems. And the systems can be changed, but if the cogs are still doing the exact same thing they always have been, it the systems will then break anyway. So it's important to know. Maybe calling them the cogs is not the best, whatever, but they are a fixture that you
Mhm.
have to understand
Yeah.
how they work to understand the rest of the system.
Mhm. Pieces of the
So
whole.
exactly. So now, when it comes to getting to know people, that's kind of comes down to building your community. And effectively, you want to build your community kind of as much as possible. And so the most efficient way I have found to do that is something that I learned about in BNI, Business Networking International. It's a pyramid scheme cult that makes everyone involved a lot of money, and technically isn't actually a ripoff, but is all based on NLP, neuro linguistic programming. Um, One-to-ones are a very structured form of a business meeting. Functionally, they're similar to a date, but instead of trying to get into each other's pants or determine if you want to, you are learning about the how to work with and refer to the other person. You're effectively learning what
Mhm.
makes you individual, what makes you special. How do I send business to you, and And the reason of those one-to-ones in the business world is because sending a customer to someone else builds reciprocity, which I'll get to later, but it is a way to help each other without actually costing anyone anything. Effectively, if I
Mhm.
send you a customer, then that customer is happy, and so that becomes relevant later when we're talking about power dynamics in politics. But one-to-ones are a structured coffee or other activity. It's really often usually breakfast or coffee, but that obviously becomes way more complicated when we're talking about people who don't have money. So like libraries, there's fine third spaces that are good for this, or cheaper coffee shops. There it will require adaptation, but structured coffee or other activity for the purpose of learning about each other's self-interests, backgrounds, skill sets, and networks. So, I've seen organizing and networking models that like have lists of questions you should do, but really this is you're kind of going to this to some level or another, bearing your soul, but you're also there to learn about them. And that's kind of really
Yeah.
the important part is you're there to listen. You're there to
Mhm.
learn what their values are, um, and how you can help them. And sure, they will appreciate it. Like this inherently is beneficial to you and also ends up like building all these connections because like you'll obviously talk about yourself and your own organization and what you're doing, and if they're interested they'll say, wait, can I help with this or something like that, or
Mhm.
they'll share their ideas. um, but this is a process that everyone kind of needs to learn for the purpose of growing these communities, especially when it comes to neurodivergence. There's a level of we only associate with who we already know, and that has to be we have to get past that to some level or another. That being
Yeah.
said, a lot of people are way, way, way better in groups. If I am way more, my secret to success in Worcester at this point is that I can go kind of anywhere and I know 3 to 5 people at this point. And for the past few
Mhm.
years, it's always been like one or two. So where I'm going with that is it makes everyone more comfortable going to any of these things when they already know people there. So encouraging people to create their own groups to start this and kind of then having larger meetings together might be one option, but then you run into a lot of other issues that are entirely separate. But when it comes to
Mhm.
meetings, keep it free rather than a restaurant. If possible, provide childcare. Make sure
Mhm.
it's an accessible venue in many different ways, like factor in people with auditory processing issues, not
Mhm.
just wheelchairs. You need to make sure not too loud. People have to be able to hear themselves speak as well as, of course, being safe. Um, find You have to do them regularly, and when I say regularly, it's less about the quantity or the actual frequency and more about the consistency. People need
Mhm.
to know when it will be, where it will be, as far in advance as
Yeah.
possible, because um, everyone has something, and it's okay to miss one or two if you know you're going to make 7 other ones. But if you have no clue when
Yeah.
it's going to be every single time, you're never going to get neurodivergent people to it. Um,
Mhm.
on the same note, expect very few people to show up the first few times. Um, but find an oh right, have a simple but firm agenda and be prepared to cut things off. And
Okay.
so realistically, someone needs to run the meeting. In a perfect world, that is you for as little time as possible, because creating the meeting and actually running the meeting ends up being two entirely completely different
Yeah.
things, but also is
Mhm.
different. If you're choosing who's going to be on the agenda, you don't also want to be choosing when they're done talking. Like, it just, you don't want to be in that position, and it also shares the power and responsibility.
Yep.
um, but
I've
having
already ran into that issue of like I'll have like once a month I'll have people over to be like, oh, we'll have like a brief meeting and then we'll have a game night. And like it never turns into what we plan. Like, and I have a really hard time like cutting people off. So that's something that
Well,
I
so
should
that's
work
another
on.
meeting. That's actually something I would specifically advise against, the having one thing and then another, because
Mhm.
then especially with the neurodivergent crowd, because then you're dealing with a lot of apprehension of when it's going to be, and they have to prepare themselves for both things. I do strongly, I understand you're dealing with time constraints, and it might make more sense to have a Zoom meeting once a week, but like there is something to be said about connecting all of these organizations and groups are already getting together. Why not add on politics
Yeah.
to that? It might make more sense to connect them, like to have a separate group chat for that kind of thing, um, rather than add it on to the existing activity or combine the two, because then I don't know. also then everyone's exhausted by the end of the night, and that's the other thing worth mentioning is that this shit gets really tiring really quickly, and is also different kinds of tiring than most people are used to. Um,
Yeah.
so plan for a lot of burnout. Half the reason you have
Yep.
to do all these one-to-ones and keep growing your network is because people systematically overwhelm themselves because they don't know what they're getting into, and then it
Hmm.
so yeah.
But there's a group of us, like I think there was like 7 of us all together. Got together yesterday, and it was kind of funny. Like some in neurodivergent fashion, forgot that it was Trans Day Visibility, but like it was a group of 7 trans people all getting together and being visible. We went to a coffee shop and yeah, had like a little like meeting thing, and it was just yeah, it was good. We talked a lot about how to avoid burnout and things that roles we need to establish and um, I shared the links that you sent me before the call, and there's one person that like immediately latched onto that first one and was like, "I'm gonna make this my whole personality now." So
Yeah,
like,
and it's
yeah, I love stuff like that. Like,
and but that kind of that's exactly how it happens. Like 7 people at a
yeah,
coffee table who then go off and do their own things, and like that is how these things. So yeah, especially with sharing resources. So like that's the other thing is like,
hmm,
you know, effectively, unless someone is actively working against you, which I'll get to that later. There's a lot of that in politics. Unless someone's actively working against you, share your shit with them. Like,
yeah,
there are people who will steal your ideas, and I have a fortune cookie that
hmm,
says, imagine what you could accomplish if you didn't care who got the credit. Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
when you're trying to set an example or you're doing things with the platform, that is hard, but also that is something that doesn't happen enough in progress or politics, and is one of the
hmm,
the ways to get more things done is say, wait a second, you do this well, here you go, and not ever need your name attached. Anyway, I know that's not an issue with you, but it's definitely worth mentioning.
hmm,
Yeah, meetings. So as far as another thing, ideally join other people already doing it.
yeah,
But they're both aren't enough and are too many, it seems. Like, if you're trying to look for meetings, I always find that there's ones that don't actually align with my interests.
yep,
Email mailing lists. You got to have some way of keeping people on the same page. An email mailing list is, I'd say, relatively free and simple way to do it, but you also could have a group chat if you can handle running a group chat.
yeah. We've got a group chat that's like a main one, and then there's like split into like specific topics for certain things.
Perfect.
Um, so yeah, it's pretty
Perfect.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
communication between everyone is kind of going to be the largest thing overall. I'm not going to go into security much just because like that article I sent you already does a lot of it.
yeah,
And frankly, it changes by the week, it seems. Um,
hmm,
okay, so the next on my list. Okay, yeah. These all kind of it is over the place, but it makes sense. Social proprioception. Are you familiar at all with the word proprioception? Okay,
yeah.
cool. I'm
In
still gonna
interoception.
in what? Oh yes, yep. I'm still gonna pretend you're not and explain it because one, I love this word, and two,
Good.
it's a core concept, and I assume most people are not familiar with it. My favorite example of people learning proprioception is kids playing patty cakes because they're both. It is about the physical pressure of hands against each other as well as the matching it to the rhythm. It's the interacting and like learning and that whole motion and so it's everything that most people are looking for in like kink, in hugs, in a weighted blanket. It's uh, but it's really kind of just the sense of pressure rather than touch. It's felt under the skin,
Hmm.
but also the sense of proximity, like the sense of how close things are to you. So like, if I close my eyes and I know that the laptop is that ish far, yeah, from me, that's also proprioception, and that's somehow felt in the joints. And I don't really understand this, but I did an acid fuel deep dive on it a while ago. And anyways, proprioception is one of, I think, my superpowers. Like, it's an autistic thing, but it's an awareness. Anyways, but it's also one of the more fascinating, like the amount of different ways proprioception ends up coming up in life. Anyways, social proprioception is a concept I have been toying around with and solidifying and applying. And social proprioception is effectively gauging someone else based on how they interact with other people, and learning them based on their interactions and um, how they move about a crowd, how people talk about them, how people respond about them, who they associate with. In polyamory, this is stupidly easy. You can learn what kinds
Mhm.
of relationships someone's upholds, what kinds of toxicity is going on in their life, if they are codependent, just by looking at and listening to their existing relationships. It's not as simple with everyone else, but you can still meet people and talk to them and hear how they talk about their coworkers. And so this comes in
Mhm.
very handy when you're meeting people and talking to them. What you're really looking for is less of, I mean, obviously morality, ethics, and value matter, but congruency. You're looking for people whose words, actions, and ideologies are aligned. And many
Mhm.
people will have some actions and ideologies that are aligned, but they say a lot of different things because they think of themselves differently, and or they'll do things that are harmful to what they say they care. I don't know. There's a lot of
Yeah.
That's what you kind of need to look for, and the way you can kind of gauge that is by hearing how they think about others, how they interact with the world around them. But also,
Mhm.
once you know someone's good, you can really rapidly figure out who else is good by seeing who they associate with, who they trust, who they
Mhm.
like. Once you know someone's bad, if someone supports them, you know that person either has bad judgment or supports their bad ideologies. Um,
Mhm.
and so one of the things I'm going to address later is how it's all high school cliques. But between that and is red tape. So do you have any questions before I go further?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Red tape and gray tape. Red tape is easily identifiable. It can be discussed and referenced. It's the laws, the rules. Everyone knows where it is and can figure it out. Gray tape is less obvious. It comes across as unanswered emails, vague processes that require going through someone who doesn't return voicemails, applications that are not always denied or rejected, rules that aren't written anywhere but are upheld by precedent. My city is built around gray tape. And
Mhm.
um, the thing about gray tape is you don't really know kind of where it is or what it is. It's not clearly defined. It's most often functionally supported by one old white dude who is the resource of information. So nothing can happen without someone asking him about the way it's supposed to happen. And then,
Mhm.
mm, you know, yeah, so that's a lot of. So that brings me to the importance of towing lines, which is
Okay.
also goes back to privilege. But when you tow lines, you can highlight where the gray tape is. You can, as far as progress goes, function as whatever that spray is that they use to get laser lines to show up in spy movies. Everyone else doesn't know where they are. They just know that if they hit that line, it's bad for them, but they don't know where those
Mhm.
lines are. At this point, your job is to walk around, touching it, getting zapped, and then saying, "Hey, there's a nice big red line right here." Except it's not red; it's gray. And
Yeah.
so when you're towing lines, you get to show everyone else where those lines are, which brings me to the next point, knowing the laws, open meeting, recording, and rules for the specific body you're in front of. Those are going to be wildly different depending on the state, municipality, and type of thing you're in. Courts have different ones than town halls, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to know the ones for where you are. If I'm not mistaken, if I recorded cops like I do in Worcester in Louisiana, I would get arrested for that act of recording. So
Yep.
it really is important to know based on where you are.
Yeah.
In Massachusetts, we've got the open meeting law. There's going to be an equivalent everywhere that
Mhm.
all bodies are expected to uphold, but they will functionally only do they will do as much as they can get away with, which I will address later. Um, Open meeting recording rules for the specific body. When I say rules for the specific body, sometimes that's the chair makes the rules as it goes. Sometimes it's public comment is at any point in time for 2 minutes. Sometimes it's you can speak on any item as long as you want. I don't know. There's a lot of different ones. Okay. Power exchange and reciprocity. The Bowling for Soup song, High School Never Ends?
Oh yeah.
That is the
That's
theme of
exactly what I
poly.
was thinking of earlier when you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I write it that way. It is the theme to all of this. High school never
Yep.
ends. Lyrics from that, but it's all clicks and who sits with who at lunch. And so this is
Mhm.
under the power exchange and reciprocity, because a lot of these people, like you wonder kind of like, why the hell are you a city councilor? It's often a social circle thing for them,
Yep.
as well as like how they maintain their status in the community. Um, and so it's based on like their partner's job is built around it, their where their it's their social
Mhm.
identity, um among everything else, and that ends up being really important. um, on the same, high school never ends line, remember that people are often not genuine with either themselves or others. They might be passionate but self-centered, or they might think that by helping you or making you think they are helping you, they're going to get closer to the power you might have. And I wrote
Mhm.
that to a friend who is running for school committee, because there's all kinds of dynamics that people don't really realize until they're about to be in a position of power. And like, even if you aren't there yet, people absolutely start treating you as if you are, because they think you might be and they want some of that. So it's like, even if you're not in a
Mhm.
position of power yet, people will still try to latch on to the power you might eventually have, um,
Oh yeah.
especially in these manipulative ways. So that's the good news, is you often get like a little bit of a teaser of it, and then because like once you actually have power, the people who are doing it are way more sleek and direct about however they have these conversations, because they've been doing it for longer.
Mhm.
Whereas the other people are trying to get in at the ground level, and usually less experienced in this, or have already burnt through bridges at a higher level.
Yeah.
I call it a conservative circle jerk, because it really is just a bunch of people exchanging power amongst themselves.
Yep.
That's kind of what these meetings end up being for them. But reciprocity is not always financial. Um, sometimes it's a part. Here's a really good example. I have a friend who's a retired reporter that worked in politics in 6 states, and he's told me about how a former, I don't even know, but a former elected official of Rhode Island had a um, stacks of license plates in his office closet, and he would offer people like their name or the first letter, like, because he just held on to the good ones and then used those as a negotiation tactic. And like, that's such a weird example, but it's shit like that, like things that you can't
Mhm.
imagine but other people have no actual any like fathomable access to. um
Yeah.
that does actually have some level of value around. So like, there's little, it also can be simplistic, like we fix your street better. I realized, I also, it doesn't have to be political. I realized now, I was wondering, like, okay, this dude, we have a city councilor who I've been up against pretty frequently, and um, I'm kind of figuring out, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, there's no way actually anyone likes this guy. Do they just agree with him? Or, like, why do they actually like, and I realized what this ends up coming down to is that he gives them what they want. Like, that's all this ends up coming down
Mhm.
to, is he gives them what they want. That's the key to politics. And, without, obviously, there's the caveat of fuck everyone else, but gives them what they want. And when it comes down to it, is like, he is, I was thinking, like, how can you even do that? Like, I'm looking at back what his job is. He's a real estate attorney. He has way, way, way more power in court as a local politician. In the same aspect, one of our my district representative's husband is the developer. I'm sure he has way more pull in conversations, because, if someone pisses him off, his wife can make their career hell in Worcester. Like, it's so it's there's like dynamics of situational control that, once you're dealing with people in power, ends up getting exchanged. And this is really less of the activism level and more of the politicians level, but it's worth, when you're looking from an outside view at why who is doing what, it really helps to think about this. Like, sometimes it's their son got a better deal on a building or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
because all these people are dealing with like percentage based transactions or tens of thousands of dollars, that, like, the fact that the deal happens at all is a benefit to them. um, or just the fact that these people do deals regularly or know people or a good word from them down the road, like, it's all shit like that.
Mhm.
It's also worth noting small business owners have this built into their model. So like, you'll see a lot of, here we have it feels like every election there's like two or three different small business owners like running for a position. And
Mhm.
there's a really clear cut, like they already have a lot of support in the community. They already have, some of them actually are good with marketing or branding. But
Mhm.
what it really kind of comes down to is they have everyone knows that if you help them out, they can help you out through their business. With me, I was able to offer people computer repairs, but it's if you have a restaurant, like that becomes the meeting place. Like having a venue is one of the most valuable things you can offer people in society. And so that's one of the ways this kind of thing happens.
Mhm.
Okay, do you have any questions before I go further?
Nope.
Cool. Okay. The importance of systems and tools. I know we're smart. I know our memory is good, but um,
Yeah.
so communication,
My memory is
responsibility.
not good.
Well, so okay, fair enough. On my end, the problem, my recall is really great, but my short term like retention is kind of like non-existent. Um,
That, yeah,
exactly, and that happens for
that.
all of us, which is why we need
Mhm.
systems. In a perfect
Mhm.
world, I would know where the information is, where I save, like, and then be able to. I have
Mhm.
frankly, that's the benefit of digital systems, is that everything can be searched or whatever if you have it set up a way that you then consistently use.
Yeah.
So for just so what it really, the meme about the paperclip, the girlfriend asks where's a paperclip, and the boyfriend says it's next to my dresser, the dresser foot, and like the captions are
Oh
always
yeah,
very
like on the
funny.
ground, like yeah,
But
yeah,
also like that is like, sure, I only have three paper clips, but I only need two at any given time, and I know where all three of them are in my room. So what's the big deal? Why do
yeah,
I need a
yeah.
paperclip drawer? Anyways,
Mhm.
when you're working with communication, the responsibility, and the project management, and tracking the ideas and activities of many different people and ongoing things and concepts, it all gets overwhelming really, really, really quickly. So
Mhm.
like where this is going is careful of overloading or overwhelming your people, but also yourself, because it
For
kind
sure.
of, especially when you're working on progress, because it's really easy to justify pushing your own limits because like you can push your limits, you've done harder stuff, et cetera, and this is not
Mhm.
about you. Like you've done harder things when it was
Yeah,
just about you, and this
exactly.
benefits way more than you. Don't do that. Like this isn't an like oxygen mask first thing. This is a you one are setting a bad example for everyone else, and then two, increasing the likelihood that at a point of actual crisis you will not be reliable, which is so.
Exactly.
So you need to, the most important thing here is everyone's rest as much as possible, because on the other hand of this, the purpose of their exercises is to deplete our energy. So.
Mhm.
So yeah, self-care and support. Support is actually so self-care sounds obvious, but like don't just make sure you're doing it. Make sure remind people to do it, encourage people to do it, normalize it, enforce boundaries around it. Say, I'm sorry, Tuesday, I don't do activism on Thursdays or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's a director of the director of the anti-foreclosure team I work with. Um, I don't remember what day of the week it is, but I once tried to call her and she was like so annoyed, saying, "This is my day. I sleep because all these other days," and like it's valid. I didn't know it, but
Yeah.
I guess that's the other thing. Make sure everyone knows these boundaries. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, self-care and support. The reason I say support is because my whole plan in Worcester was effectively destabilize, inspire, and replace. We need a progressive majority city council to be able to get anything good done around here, and we haven't had a progressive majority for a while. So rather than getting people who have demonstrated that they don't care and don't want progress to care, I'm trying to replace them with people who already care. Now step one, destabilize, because the status quo is the problem. They're trying to maintain it. I got to destabilize the status quo, and then inspire. Get other people, because frankly, just me running doesn't actually alone like doesn't. I can replace one person. We need to replace like three or four.
Yeah.
So that's where the inspire comes in, and then of course replace. The problem with my plan was I wasn't supporting the people I destabilized or the people I inspired. So when support is extremely important because there will be a lot of other people inspired by everything you're about to do, and it's not just sharing resources with them. It's you're about to have to be more responsive, redirecting.
Mhm.
So like you become the part of the reason I didn't end up running a nonprofit was because I don't want to be just another guy redistributing resources,
Yeah.
and so that is still what you end up doing but these resources, like instead of food and money, it is people's attention, people's
Yeah.
spreadsheets. But that is, when you think about it, kind of that is the most efficient way to do all of this, because we all have some wildly different skill sets. And we were talking the other day, there are some people who are good at public speaking, some who are good
Hmm.
at the back end work. Those people, getting your best position right now is getting all those people into a group chat and figuring out how people can do everything. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people around the country in that exact position right now. After self-care and support is people-pleasing and boundaries. And the reason I have people-pleasing at first and then in boundaries in parentheses is because volunteer work is inherently drawn. People-pleasers are really, really, really common in this because
Yeah.
they want the validation of that. And that's, that can be its own issue. There are also sometimes really hard workers. Like there have been times when I've been like, shit, I really need to talk to this person about privilege, but also they show up every single time, and like it creates a difficult balance. And but you have to be aware that there are a ton of people pleasers in this, and sometimes that's a supportive thing. Sometimes these people need people around them, and this is what they've learned, and there's a level of acceptance. But what it really comes down to is on your end, it's going to be about boundaries. Because
Yeah.
you and I've almost found it's easier to have shorter conversations with most people, and then in-depth ones every now and then. As an advocate and activist, you will draw, for lack of a better phrase, the crazy. And these are not people who should be dismissed for their mental health. They're people who have been utterly failed by society, need a significant amount of support, but also
Hmm.
because of how much support they need, most people end up turning them away, and it creates a cycle of like they will drain support if you are not careful about how much you allow them to take. And
Yeah.
you got to get good at that, or else you will lose all your resources and also fail at helping other people too. Unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, Something I added because something we talked about last time was people who bring a large different idea to the table, because that happens all the time in these conversations. You might be talking about one thing and then someone else says, "Oh, I've got this other idea it might actually be related, but it's like 8 steps away and doesn't solve the problem you're working on right then and requires a lot more resources."
Hmm.
Or um, there
Yeah.
is a place for all of those kinds of solutions in activism and progress and liberation. But it is at very different levels and points, and you're going to have to find the right way to communicate to your group of people that now is not the time or place, is kind of what this
Yeah.
comes down to. Being supportive about it, especially when it's actually a good idea, like helping them. The easiest way to kind of get out of this without actually shutting it down is to be like, now we can't, we're here to talk about this, but actually afterwards, let me introduce you to so and so. And then put two people who have the
Hmm.
same kind of passion in a room. And sometimes that turns into its own exactly what they wanted. So these are just sign tips from Clark University. They were the union workers were protesting the conditions. They were asking for sorry, they weren't, the student workers were trying to unionize. They wanted to have a card count, and they had to protest to get it. And so this is Clark University, which is I don't know. Anyways, where I'm going with this, they had their shit together. Their
Hmm.
protest was in front of the main gates, and they had what I would call a turkey circle, like effectively just a bunch of protesters following each other, and it was horrible on my legs, but like
Oh.
effective as hell. Um, Anyways, their signs were large, had grommeted holes on the top, and neck straps, so you didn't have to hold them. And
Oh.
that is game changing. Also, they were like laminated so they could be reused. So finding like a
Hmm.
local sign shop that might be willing to make you 3 or 4 like corrugated plastic signs with lanyards in them would, make everything a lot easier for everyone if you're ever doing anything with signs.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
But also, when it comes to making signs, making it ahead of time is, of course, also a great like, I wouldn't say like community project, but like it's good. It's a good time to talk as well as like debrief ahead of time.
Community building. It's almost
Yes,
like an arts and crafts event when you're making signs and stuff. Like, yeah.
exactly.
There's been those that have been able to go to protests and stuff have done some sign making parties beforehand. Um, so that's already happening.
Fantastic. Good.
Mhm.
Okay. The next things I have are good practices, and I'm going to probably skim through these. No, we'll see how far I get. Um, because some of these are actually really important. But I'm going to try. So, good practices. Writing in complete stories. So, like, you're not writing in complete sentences. You're not writing in complete thoughts. You're writing in complete stories. Think of everything you send as if it will be screenshotted and referenced out of context. If you're talking about something that happened, do not assume the recipient is familiar with it. Reference it or refer to the report slash document slash meeting where it was discussed. I will often
Mhm.
specify the moment in a meeting that a specific thing was said when I'm like filing a public records request, because that gets it
I
to
do
actually.
that.
I mean, it makes a difference. And also, like, then what are they going to
Yeah,
say? That we don't know what you're talking
yeah.
about? Because if you don't do
Mhm,
that, they might say we don't know what you're talking about. That brings me
mhm.
to record keeping. Don't delete emails. Save all records. Take photos. Use automatic cloud backup when possible, but be mindful of storage fees. It adds up quickly,
Yeah.
and then you're stuck with like $9 a month to Google or Apple for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
You will need to reference documents you've already sent for dates or exact wording and just being organized. So make sure you know where those files are. It makes a huge difference. Stay organized
Yeah.
using folders and sorting naming scheme for documents so you know where they are when you need to find them. Google Drive is fantastic and functional, but just especially if you're like working with a shared group for a bunch of people, just make sure everyone knows the scheme so that you can all stick to it.
Okay.
Because as soon as it starts getting messy, it piles up really, really quickly. You also can
Mhm.
have like a general put folders here and someone else sorts them thing for people who won't follow it, but just make sure you have a really good person who does that in a process if there's unknowns or whatever. But I
Mhm.
found it on my personal side to be easiest if I have a plan of how I'm going to do it, and then I just follow that when I'm creating the folder structure. And that way, also, like, if people want to know where a file is, it's where I told them it would be, even if I
Yeah.
created it 7 months after I told them where it would.
Mhm. Okay.
Email as much as possible. Progress can often be denied by them ignoring an email, so you want to keep it simple and short. I have seen so
Okay.
many different things ignored because people ask too many good questions, especially when you're dealing with like gray tape. But often you're dealing with like a front desk person who doesn't actually know the answers, and every question that you ask that they don't know the answer to adds up. I'm doing it. I'll check it in. I'm activism call. Um, and also, if they have something to object to, they're sometimes more likely to respond. So, like, I've found that if you have like 3 or 4 emails that don't get a respond to, if you say, "Hey, I'm going to do this because, as I understand it, this," they might finally respond to that
Yeah.
fourth one. It's a rule of the internet. People are more likely to correct you than help you. 100%
Mhm.
true with municipal politics. Also, don't be afraid to CC multiple people or a general inbox as well if your first email is ignored. When I say CC
Okay.
multiple people, I mean start drama. CC their boss, CC the city manager, CC the fucking mayor.
Become
Um,
a problem.
well, so what it really does effectively is it gets them to say, shit, I got to actually do this because someone else's eyes are on this. It
Yeah.
also gets them to say that they know that someone else is not looking at it in the same way. Hey,
Yeah.
um, yeah, they know that someone else is looking at it, which means it actually has to, they have to actually do their job. Um,
Yeah.
and if you regularly, when I'm dealing with things, I will occasionally BCC people for the purposes of making them concerned that I'm BCCing things when I send them to things, when I send them, but
Mhm.
also because um, you do that often enough and people like this is literally starting drama, but it's at a professional level with a paper trail that they actually legally have to follow through on, so it's forcing
Yeah.
them to address accountability that they otherwise would not, because
Mhm.
even if the issue you're addressing is something they might have been able to get away with, the paper trail you are creating is something they know needs to be addressed, which brings me to the next thing: time tracking. You should use a calendar or reminders to keep track of how many days have passed in appeals. We're going to talk about applying increasing pressure by later on. Time tracking is going to be extremely important for that, but also like if you're trying to file a petition, you have to. Hey, I'll check it in a moment. Okay. if you're filing a petition, there's certain deadlines. Like in my city, it's because city council is Tuesday night, and you have to have things in 48 hours ahead of time. They require you to have everything to them like Thursday at I think 3:15, and that way it's available for the 4:15 agenda they put together. But knowing those timelines and knowing them ahead of time
Yeah.
makes sense because your deadline is not the meeting; it's always before the meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, public comment. This was written for here. It may be completely different, but I'm still going to rattle it off, and we'll go from there. When it's your turn to speak, you just step up to the podium. You adjust the microphone to your height. That is actually really important, especially with some shittier microphones. State your name and city or town of residence. Usually it's fine if you only say your first name. Even though some people say your address, you usually don't have to. You can also say you like work in the city or what your connection is if you don't live there. Some places will only allow residents to speak. Tell them which item number you are there to speak about. It'll usually be on the agenda, but also if you're bringing a bunch of people, make sure they know that ahead of time, what item number they are there to speak on, not just their prepared points.
Mhm.
So if there's a time limit, you'll usually be cut off after you go to that. They will often tell you to wrap it up. Sometimes they will mute a mic. It really does depend on the place, and they usually don't do that.
Okay.
Address the chair, not the individual counselors. So in my situation, that means address it directly to like the mayor of the person running the meeting, not the individual people sitting there at the meeting. You can make a statement to them, often like using a phrase such as "through the chair." The purpose of the whole "through the
Mm.
chair" bullshit is because it's really more about preventing arguments between counselors or someone the counselors are talking to. So like through the chair when someone is giving a report means through the mayor or the chair of the meeting to the person who's giving the report, and that way there's an intermediary, um, so that none of this is like directly personal to each other, which you
Mhm.
can definitely get around if you address it to the mayor or the chair. Um, crafting your public comment. So in Worcester, like I said, you have 2 minutes. So if it helps, write your stuff ahead of time. I recommend practicing
Mhm.
with a friend, but generally speaking from the heart at the podium is powerful too. At the very least, give yourself a few bullet points. It's important to state why you care, who you think this decision impacts, examples of the problems you've witnessed that this will address, or why this change is needed. You can appeal to their compassion or threaten to not vote for them, but I view public comment as a message to the public more than the officials. You're creating the public narrative of what your city or town wants, and then it's on them to demonstrate their ability to get it for the people by aligning their actions with what the people ask for. So public comment is an opportunity to create a resounding nod around the city of people saying, yeah, you know what? That person's right. That's exactly what we need. That's the way to do it. And I want the city council to agree or this. So you're proposing an idea that you need everyone else to, including the city councilors, to agree with, rather than trying to get the city councilors or the body to actually believe you're right. And I say that because that's all this kind of really comes down to. Like if they already think you're right, then you don't need to convince them. You're there because they don't really believe you. You're there because they need to be convinced. Which
Yep.
brings me to the next point, increasing pressure. So
Yep.
I've accepted that there are two types of people working for problematic municipalities. People who are actively maintaining the problematic status quo because they believe in it, and people who are actively maintaining the problematic status quo because it's their job. Either way, they're not about to do things differently unless acted on by an external force. So how do you get them to do something when they're ignoring you? This brings me to a question I get pretty often, which is, don't you catch more flies with honey than vinegar? And I get that a lot. Uh, and so I want to address first and foremost, politicians are flies, and you catch more flies with shit, which I have been stirring.
Mhm.
But a little bit of honey goes a lot further after a lot of vinegar. And that doesn't work the other way around. So you can conserve your honey by using vinegar. And that's actually as simple as it sounds. If you just relax, and this is really important when we're talking about neurodivergent activists and how much energy masking takes and how exhausting it is to be nice and respectful and maintain decorum when you're discussing civil rights that are being ignored and disrespected. Um, don't be afraid to use vinegar, especially if you're working there with other people who are bringing some honey, because their honey goes a little bit further after your vinegar.
Mhm.
So on your own, what you can do is creating drama, get people talking about the issues and the lack of solutions. You can email asking questions, seeking clarity, like force them to have to assert positions that they don't really want to actually define by getting it in writing. CC the city clerk, the general email inboxes. And when I say general email inboxes, I mean like Worcester has a parking at worcestermass.gov or whatever. And there's only
Mhm.
specific things that are actually done there, but when you include these general inboxes, there's zero, they can't say, oh, we didn't see that. So if you have a point of contact who's ignoring you, it's really easy to kind of force them to have to say, like, sooner or later they have to say, well, we don't have an answer, and then that looks worse for them. Um, Also, on the same note, when you're sending follow-up, reference that. Say, hi, I emailed you on this date and this date, and I haven't received a response yet. I'm again emailing about this. If it gets too douchey, they also might not respond. But I've got videos that the Massachusetts State Police are withholding from me right now, and it's probably partially because of how I asked for it in one of my emails. Um,
Mhm.
but so they can, frankly, if they can press it, they will. But don't be afraid to reiterate, I have tried on these occasions, and effectively emphasize in each and every email, I am expecting you to do your job, and I have done my part on this end to get this. Um,
Mhm.
you can also not just see seeing people engage the media and use social media. Those are two very separate things. When I say use social media, it's obviously easier if you have your own platform, but like start a conversation in social group in local groups. Say, hey, what did you think about this issue? Or complain about a specific thing. A photo, one of the best impactful conversations for my city I had was Walking Dead was filming its what is it called, spin-off series here, and so Main Street looked like was a Walking Dead set, and we had
Mhm.
we had a trash bin that said City of New York. So I took a picture of it, and like this was like mid-spring, but there were like dead leaves all around. It was nicely done. Anyways, I took a picture of the trash bin and said all it took for us to see our city to get trash bins along Main Street was to pretend to be the remnants of an actual city. And like the conversations that starts, right? Like so adding in humor and but like everyone
Yeah.
knows these things are problems. So starting the conversations around them and using humor, but social media. When I say engage the media, I mean invite them, send clips. Um, if the media engages you, I honestly treat reporters like police, and the aspect of knowing that everything I say to them might be used against me, but also that their
Mhm.
job is to create a story. So if I give them a story, they will run with it. So it's my job to give them the same story as many different ways as possible so that they still use my words. And that's a really
Yeah.
important thing is like if you don't give a reporter a quote, they'll just use someone else's or something else. Or there was someone I ignored because I actually didn't like the way they handled something before, and they just used a clip from the last time they reported me. And so like what it really comes down to is not responding to a reporter is not normally in your best interest. But you do want to make sure that you give them talking points that they can actually use to show the story um, that they need to show.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, when engaging the media is often just inviting them, you can also create a press release and send it to them. A lot of different news stations have an email or a phone line. You can also invite them if you're doing a press release about a newer or hosting a protest about something. Invite them. And when I say invite them, I mean like invite all of them, knowing one or three might show up and probably 14 won't.
Yeah.
On the same note, keep showing up. Once you start finding something where your voice makes a difference, keep showing up. It will get other people to show up. It'll increase the impact of it. Continuously showing up to the same meetings that you like again and again is one of the most powerful things you can do for generating change, inspiring people, and reminding politicians that they can't keep doing things the way they are.
Yep.
On the same note, file complaints, file appeals. That is kind of the systematic way to increase pressure and create an external sense of accountability. So Massachusetts is relatively great about this. I can file a complaint with my police department. I can file a complaint with my city. But the attorney general has a whole series of if after doing that, if you don't get what you want, go to this, do this. And so I've been using those. And systematizing that. And on your end, I would get familiar with whatever your state it has, and then systematize that. Once you know which email to reach out to, create a script for people. I have at this point a public record script that's, hey, you're past the legal time. I'm seeking enforcement. Here's the number, and I just, if I was better about it, I could automate it with where it input everything for. I could create a form for it. So I just copy and paste the public records requests and the material I'm requesting, and it would fill out, it would repopulate it. But I'm not, so I have to manually do that when I'm copying and pasting it. But if you create a script for other people, that will make it significantly easier for them to do it. Also worth noting, maybe one already exists. Like, you might be
Yeah.
right. So there's probably, yeah. Public record requests. This is one of the most helpful tools in activism because, frankly, they're trying to hide accountability and hide records. And the public records requests is like saying, "Hey, show me your cards." Effectively,
Mhm.
it's show me what you've got. And also, so I treat public records requests like Battleship, like the board game. And where I'm going with that is saying like so first and foremost, if you're not specific enough, or you're too vague, or you're too specific, they can just say the records don't exist, and they don't have to elaborate. If you ask for something and they have a legitimate reason to hide it, sometimes they'll cite that reason. But generally speaking, if they have a record, they have to provide it. Now they don't have to make records, so like you can't say I want to know, I don't know, how many times this happened on this street. They'd have to compile a report of it, and they don't do that. But if you wanted emails, reports, meeting minutes, sometimes body-worn camera footage, sometimes city street cameras. Although I guess that really depends on one, if it was recording, and then two, if it was retained. Sometimes things are, yeah, and then sometimes hardware logs like drone flights. But if it
Mhm.
was communicated on a record through the city, which a lot of it is supposed to be, you can get a copy of it. So public records requests are really powerful for effectively, because then you can reference them and you'll know more than most of the public record. Most of the public does, but like that's kind of what shows on what goes around in the back behind, rather than what happens at the meeting. You can say, I don't know. I'll try to find a few examples and send them over. But where I'm going with the board game Battleship is, when if I ask for something and they say there's no records, sometimes that means there's actually no records, and sometimes what that means is, um, I need to ask for three things around it, and then one of those three things is, what? Battleship might not be the right example. It's more like Minesweeper. Wait, yeah, Minesweeper. Effectively, when you're finding out how close you are to other things, like
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes.
Okay, there
So
you go. Yeah.
yeah, but also be aware of, for example, with body worn camera footage, if it takes more than 2 hours for them to redact it, then I can get charged for it. So I make sure. So like I made the mistake once of asking for all of the footage from a protest, which was like 13 cops and $900 of redaction time. Um,
Oh,
so in other words, start with smaller requests if you're going for anything that might be time sensitive, because that
okay.
gets very expensive very quickly.
Good
And
to
you are
know.
not allowed, or at least in Massachusetts, you're not allowed to break it up to get a cheaper public records request.
Mhm.
There are ways to do it, but it's still tricky. Um, yeah, so sometimes when to confirm, so sometimes I've had to file a bunch for multiple different timeframes. Like if I wanted to confirm, for example, when the city got a document, that document might not actually be labeled unless it was through email. But I can say I want all of this document from this date to this date, and confirm that there are 0 records, and then file the exact same request for this date to this date, and then there is a record. And then I just kind of narrow it down further. And then I can find out when they actually got something. And I've proven that people were lying using that before, because like, there's
Mhm.
undated memos that you can't really prove when the memo was received otherwise. But having 7 different, there are no responsive records, and one, here's the file we provided you on this date, shows when that record was received. And that's something that they actively try to hide. I don't know if you're going to run into that, but you can. Um, what records are kept? So things that are not available is like in-person conversations or phone calls. I haven't successfully gotten text records, even though technically one's sent during meetings or while employees are on the job, or technically public record. I don't really know if Worcester just hasn't enforced that, or if there's not actually case law or what. Okay. Last kind of thing is teamwork for activism. We all have individual limitations, but we still have collective strengths. Activism is often a combination of multiple fronts. It's showing up and writing in, but it's also the legislative side, the paperwork required for long-term change, and public engagement, advocacy, protest. Play to your strengths. Not everyone is going to be comfortable public speaking. Not everyone is going to be good at writing emails or keeping track of dates. There's also always room for artists and their work and their artwork and progressive change. I personally have illegible handwriting and don't do phone calls. So like when people talk about like, I'm never going to be making a sign and I will not be doing phone banking. But those are legitimate ways that people should help. So not just you, but in general, partner with people who
Yeah.
are working on similar things to you, and then figure out who's bringing what to the table. If you need help, and invite more people to the table. And when you're working on doing things that help large communities, there's often people eager to help that just need a bit of direction. Some
Your audio is starting to break up pretty bad.
Okay. Honestly, it's probably their Wi-Fi going to shit. Everyone else is showing up for City Hall, but also now there's a bunch
Okay.
of people talking in the hallway.
I think that could be it.
Okay. I'm gonna try to read this last part. Can you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you need one person to ask nicely and then the other to file appeals and make their job difficult. I call it the good cop, bad cop approach. Both being the
Okay.
people being persistent, but one cooperating with the city, asking nicely, and the other just filing things to make them do their job until they actually do it. Sometimes that works faster than either party doing it by themselves. That's the honey vinegar thing.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, you had mentioned the good cop, bad cop thing before, and I was like, okay, that makes sense.
It's honestly the way I've gotten the actual most done. Anyway, city council starts in 7 minutes. Feel free to write up a list of any questions you have, and I'll try to info dump on them before your thing Thursday.
Okay, no worries.
Cool.
Thank
And
you.
do you want me to like edit? I could probably blur your name or something before like posting this to YouTube. Or are you okay with it being as is?
Yeah, as is fine.
Cool. You got it. I'll post it probably tonight.
Okay.
I'll talk to you later.
All
Have a
right.
great evening.
Talk to you later. Bye.